Hello and welcome to CSO Connected. Today we have the pleasure of meeting Paul Brooks. He and I are going to spend some time talking about the buyer-seller relationship. How has it changed? What's happening today? There's rumors that the buyer has all the power because they have access to information. Does that leave the seller as not bringing anything to the table, or does the seller still have control and opportunities to guide buyers to make a purchase from them? We're going to unpack that and explore those topics a little bit. Paul, you are the sales director for retail and consumer with Wincanton.
That's
Did
correct.
I get that right?
You did.
Can you tell us a little bit about your role in your business?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Wincanton is the largest logistics company, British logistics company in the UK, the third largest business and fleet in the UK market. Wow. So we run a lot of trucks, clearly, run over 200 warehouses, and deliver pretty much everything. We're sitting here just before Christmas, and so everything that you will consume around Christmas from every grocery retailer in the UK will have probably delivered in some way, shape or form. So
I'm going to confess I will consume too much this
Yeah.
holiday season.
Yeah, so beers, wines and spirits we do extensive amounts of. I have a big bonded business, and obviously with Brexit very much on the agenda, it's something that we are extremely proud of and very competent in as a business. And what it means is that we get access to talk to pretty much anybody we like in our market. People want to talk to us because of our expertise, but that doesn't necessarily mean they want to do business with us.
Right. Well, then that's both a positive and a negative, I suppose. So you're well regarded for the thought leadership in the space, but always nice when someone likes to affirm that with a business deal. Right?
Indeed.
We all like friends, but
Yeah.
in business we need contracts. Well, listen, you clearly have extensive experience with buyer-seller relationships and the ways that has shifted over the landscape of time. And I know that you feel pretty passionate about building relationships and trust, which we'll get onto in a minute. But tell us a bit about your journey, how, kind of what's brought you to the convictions and the passions you have about sales today, besides lots of experience doing it.
Sure, do. Well, I started out actually as a buyer. So I started out and did all my professional qualifications on behalf of Boots. So I was a retail buyer. I like to say I started out in ladies' swimwear, actually, which conjures probably the wrong image, but started off buying fashion clothing. Then I got promoted into garden chemicals, which wasn't a great change. And then after a time, I left Boots and went into to Unipart, so car parts, automotive, because they wanted to move into retail. And what I found was that actually my journey there was much more around forecasting and development of solutions internal to the business, more than retail. And then I left and went into computers, and I got to the start of the internet revolution, really. Which was a real privilege. And so I was selling the vision of what the internet might become in 1994. And that got me into selling ideas. And that changed me from solutions creating on supply chain into selling a vision. And that created this, sort of ignited my passion for selling solutions around something that was yet to be created, if that makes sense.
The art of the possible.
Indeed, and so that gave me a passion to sort of create a way of talking to people and building relationships about this future vision. And I spent quite a bit of time doing that. We were extremely successful, and we floated the company at that time. And I then got the opportunity to go back into supply chain around back to Unipart, because I'd left Unipart at that point, come away, and really set up a business that was all about creating a new way of adding demand to supply and making it really efficient and lean. So we were into lean and continuous improvement, and through the Unipart way, well recognised for that. Indeed, yeah, exactly right. And we launched Dan Jones's book, The Machine That Changed the World, in 1990 there. Nice. So that starts to date me, obviously. But what we created was a thing about shared destiny partnership, and that really ignited my sort of, what's my core being? It's actually saying, well, we're going to create something that is going to be extremely valuable to both of us over a long period of time. And that really was all about the seller's journey then. So how do we actually create something that we both, it's going to change over a time. Yep. It's going to be a lifetime partnership, might start with a 5-year contract. But we're going to start thinking on both sides how we add more value to keep this thing maintained and going. And it's always got to be win-win. So my sort of seller's journey went down that route, and I then started running multiple teams at Unipart worldwide, looking at how in different cultures we could actually create a selling journey for both startup businesses and long-term businesses jointly.
That must have been fascinating, because not only did you have the cultural realities of operating in different markets, but the entire view on business itself. I mean, in some environments, businesses are more held by governments or controlled by governments, and others, they operate in more free market societies, which certainly goes part and parcel with the culture, but also just the way in which the business approaches its customers. I imagine that must be quite different.
Yeah, and in some markets you don't market openly.
Yeah.
You build through relationships and word of mouth. We set up a business in China, which was incredibly difficult in the early days, getting to understand the culture there. And I'd had a team come over from Australia to set up China, and actually it was like oil and water. They just didn't fit together. But we built a way of working with our partners in China, and we learnt and we adapted and we started selling much more successfully as a consequence once we understood actually what they meant when they said yes, or what they meant when they said no. And I think that was quite a challenge. I think you're absolutely right. The cultural shift is quite a challenge. So if I was in Canada and North America, well, it was pretty much the same. It was a bit like Kiwi and Australia. It was always
Canadians don't like to hear that.
Exactly. Never the twain shall meet, but actually in terms of the way of selling, and how we
more
engage.
Direct, straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. It was the same. Whereas India, everybody kept saying yes and they were always meaning no. So that was really hard. And so big change.
I've certainly experienced that as well. I've lived in Holland and the UK, and obviously I'm from the States, and have done business across various markets the way that you have. And you do find that. I even find that the difference between British and American many times is quite difficult. I've left meetings, and I'll confess, I thought the meeting was fine. I thought it was good.
Yes.
And a British colleague will say, oh, that was really rough. And I thought, wow, I've really missed something, haven't I? So some of the social cues or the use of language, you really have to begin to pick up on. And I imagine then when you take that out, between the buyer and the seller, so not just internal, but when you're crossing that divide, if you will, that must become quite complicated. So what have you found is the common thread, though? I mean, no matter which market you're working in and what the culture is, what's the thing that allows that buyer-seller relationship to work well?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is back to where I was before in terms of the destination. So what is it that where you can share that destination? So the buyer is communicating they want to achieve something. So it might be service enhancement, product essence, relationship, or a cost reduction. So they want to achieve something. And the seller's job is to create a unique solution that fits or maybe exceeds the needs that buyer is stating. And I mean, I've always been a great Miller-Heiman advocate for 25 years. And so, what's the implied or explicit needs as part of this, and who's the economic buyer, who's the decision maker? So is it the communicator or is it somebody else? So I think the seller's journey is the same. So we're looking to say, what's the end value we're trying to create, and can we create something unique to that? Who are we trying to influence? What's the buying group? And over the last 5 years, I think Gartner is saying that the buying group, the decision-making unit, has increased from 5.4 to 10.8 only in the last 5 years. So that's what's evolved with time. Who's involved in making the decision, I think, has been the biggest change that I've seen in my 10, 15 years of sales leadership. And actually, we have our structured selling, therefore, and who we're creating relationships has become much more complex during that time. And building trust with a decision-making unit rather than an individual is the thing that I'm really trying to unpack at this moment in time to say, okay, can you be unique in doing that? Or do you have to be, scientific in your prosecution of individuals, which we used to be, 20 years ago when we did deals across the table and shook hands with people, and that meant the deal was done.
Yeah, well, I think those days are definitely long gone.
Long gone.
And I'd suggest that I think one of the reasons we see such a significant increase in stakeholders is things like software as a service, right? Where you're not just selling a particular product that touches one department or a group of people, but you're selling things that are highly integrated, that cross departments, that feed into various operational systems for a multitude of organizations. And so everyone wants to lay their opinion or their stamp of approval, which obviously lengthens the sales cycle and other things, but it most importantly changes who those stakeholders are. And I think deciphering the tea leaves of who really holds the power among that group. So they may need to all be involved, but who really is controlling the decision is harder, I think, to get to.